segregation, Jim Crow, Reconstruction, or in slavery. Kamala Harris has no one that would make her an ADOS. I went and looked up an article her father finally got around to writing in a Jamaican newspaper. And he's got some pictures published to him. He looks like a Hindu, and from what he says, his grandmother was about 1/8 black. And most of his grandparents were descendants of people who had owned plantations back when. Okay? She was born in San Francisco, and he says she was raised on the West Coast, but in her own bio, she acknowledges she got raised in Canada, kindergarten through the 12th grade. And her mother is a Hindu. Now, on Twitter, I posted pictures of a Hindu Brahmin caste television director. And people confuse that picture with Kamala Harris. But she has no connection, kin or otherwise, with the United States other than the fact she comes over here every now and then to do a production. But she looks just like Kamala Harris, and she does not have, nor does she claim, one single drop of black in her. By the way, you should know this. As a Hindu Brahmin, what Kamala Harris is an Aryan. You've heard of the Aryan super race that the Nazis claim, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Superman. That's mythology because what they actually look like, and the Caucasians who actually are Aryans are Hindu Brahmins. So by definition, everywhere in the world, a Brahmin is classified as a Caucasian. What Kamala Harris is called a Caucasian, just like dark-skinned Aborigines in Australia. Although they're dark, they're classified as technically Caucasian. So we even look into this thing. They kept talking about the Northern Superman, and now with DNA, we learned that the occupants of Northern Europe in Britain up until the Bronze Age were brown-skinned, dark hair. But the mythology is that they were fair-skinned whites and blonde with blue eyes, which they didn't have. So a whole lot of Caucasians have color. And if you look at your typical Hindu, and I'll admit I've dated one or two and worked around several. And the first one I ran into on the job in L.A., she's darker than you, Valerie. And I said, oh, sister. She says, I'm not a sister. She said, I'm from India. I'm a Hindu Brahmin. You know, my daddy was from the warrior caste, and he was supposed to be guarding my mother, and they ran off and got married, and they threatened to kill him, so they came to America. That's how I got here. So I got made in Bombay, and my parts got put together in L.A. But
I'm
you
glad,
see...
I'm glad you're saying it. I'm glad you're saying this, Judge Brown. I'm really glad you're saying this.
See, she's
because
technically
that's
a Caucasian, and she's
right.
never mentioned black. She joined the black sorority, but that's because, like Obama and some others and Cory Booker's, these people came along at a time when it looked like there was a possibility, so they started grooming themselves to be elected to high office. Now, the other bad problem with Kathleen, Kamala Harris is that her sexcapades are going to come out if she campaigns far enough, and it's going to be a real embarrassment. The woman's been a real live gold digger, and she's allegedly been giving up plenty of booty to get what she wants. You ever heard of the Kama Sutra?
Yeah.
You know that Indian sex book they got?
Yeah.
You know, that's part of your education if you grow up as a Hindu, is the Kama Sutra. So I guess she was throwing on Brother Willie Brown, who was, well, he's not my brother, but I'm calling him that, mayor of San Francisco. I guess she put, maybe I'll give you some of page 27 in the middle, if, you know, you help me out here. Or page 911, you know, or page 815. You know, we'll rock it out, you know.
or maybe all of it.
That's all going to come out. So, I mean, we got a built-in scandal, and they're building her up. And the thing of it is we've got to resist that because they are starting early for the same purposes that the Nazis would when they would propagandize something. Their propaganda minister, Goebbels, said, tell a lie one time, it's a lie. Tell it long enough, 1,000 times, and it becomes the truth. Tell a lie long enough and loud enough, and you can get anybody to believe it. They've heard it from various places, but those same places just came from a propaganda engine that was spreading mistruth. So,
may I add this, Judge Brown, if you don't mind? Just want to insert the piggyback of what you're saying. Because I studied, my major at Temple University was religions, not Christianity alone, but all the religions. And let me say this. We cannot minimize what Judge Joe Brown is saying in the sense that when we talk about Brahmins and the untouchables and the Brahmins and all of that, that wasn't even a class. That's a caste. A caste is deeper. It's more entrenched in them than a caste. I could be middle class, upper class. That's a class system. They had a caste system, which meant that they were, if you belong in this caste, you could not even talk to people in, let's say, the untouchables, which was the lowest of all the castes. So they're lower than, as Judge Joe Brown often says, they were listed as being subhuman, and not just from class. So we need to understand this is a caste system, a C-A-S-T-E system, not a C-L-A-S-S system. Because you can elevate yourself from one class to another class. You get enough money, get enough prestige, whatever. You can go from being poor to being a billionaire like Oprah Winfrey, and that changes your class. But the caste system is you could be a billionaire, you would still be an untouchable. That's how deep it gets. It's a deep system.
That's it.
And it's entrenched, and we should not lose sight of the fact that because Kamala is from the highest of all the orders, the priests were Brahmin, the warriors were Brahmin, all of the highest people of spiritual and social order were Brahmin. So when she calls herself, her father, her mother, and all the rest have that kind of bloodline in them, she is of the highest of caste in India. And India has what, about 2 billion people in it. So we're not talking about no class system where you can elevate yourself from one place to another. This is a caste system. You can't elevate yourself. You can't, because it's just not possible. So she's up at the highest of all caste systems.
Let me add something in there about that caste thing. In India, there is a nutrition problem, mass protein deficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
Hindu can't eat cow. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could grow beans or legumes on all of this arable land they have in India, but you can't grow it because they use it as pasture land for cows. The Brahmins can drink the cow milk, but nobody else can. So, in other words, all of the Indians have a problem with protein deficiencies, but this one caste gets to monopolize arable land so their cows can graze on it so they can have milk, which is considered holy for Brahmins.
Because let me say this, the Brahmins were supposed to have come from the gods of India. See, that's why they're such a rank. They are direct descendants of the gods, not God, but gods of India. They are descendants of the gods. So Vishnu and all of them were their parents. So because of that, they are of an elite, like we don't even know what elite is. We can't even fathom in our own westernized thinking how important and how entrenched caste is. It's almost like with the Japanese. They all believe that they were of the sun god. That they are all descendants of and the Emperor Hirohito and all the rest were direct descendants of the gods. When you start looking like things like that, so we don't look at it like that. I don't think Oprah's a member, no child of a god, though sometimes people think she is. But nevertheless, it's a deeper kind of situation that we have ourselves in here. And I think it's deeper than what people really can imagine, because we in the West don't understand this religious, cultural connection. Since we talk about separation of church and state, in those countries there is no separation of church and state. The highest order of statehood It's how close you are to God, to their gods. So the Brahmins are related to the gods. They are descendants of the gods. God infused himself in these human beings that would eventually be called the Brahmin class. And so that's where this Aryan and this superior than all other human beings started from, because we are descendants of the gods. And just like Judge Joe Brown said, I know even one of my doctors. He was darker than Shirley Chisholm, and he was Indian. Dr. Roy, his name was, but he was pure Indian. He speak the Hindi and all of that. But he was a very brown skinned man. So it's not about color. It's not about all of that. It's about your caste, and your caste is determined by how close you are to the gods. The Brahmin are the highest order of human beings, closest to the gods on earth. And so when you get that thing drilled in you and instilled in you and all of this, keep in mind, Kamala was raised by her mother, not by her Jamaican daddy. So she was entrenched with all this Brahman and Hindu and gods, Vishnu and Ishnu and all of those gods. She was enthralled with all that stuff. In fact, the highest of all the gods is named Brahman. That's his name. So the Brahmin are part of the Brahma. Brahma is the highest of all the gods. So they're very named God.
Let me throw in a little thing here. I retweeted this. There's an East Indian actress named Mindy Kaling.
Mm-hmm.
Her birth name is Mindy Chokalingam.
Mm.
And her brother wrote a book on how he got into college and got paid all the way through by faking being black. He just cut his hair off. And he's a Hindu Brahmin. And the pictures of him are posted. And he talked about how he faked being black. That's exactly what Kamala Harris is doing. He wrote a book called Almost Black. And he listed as the true story of how I got into medical school pretending to be black. And here you go. We got Kamala. You know something I find interesting? I have never heard her make a reference to black men, or for that matter, men in general. What she usually does is reference women and then talks to black women. Like last year and a half ago, when she got in the Senate and she tried to come in here with "I'm more important than you," and the rest of her fellow senatorial colleagues cut her down and said, you're in the club, you act like everybody else does. And she said on an appeal she put out on Twitter, women must stand behind me to put these men in their places. I'm appealing to all women, especially black women. And she represents a state that's now 54% Hispanic, that's California. And she never mentions Hispanics. She doesn't mention the majority of her colleagues, her constituents, which I think is kind of foolish politically. But she's been pandering because she never mentioned anything about black people before. Although I am told by people who lived out there that occasionally on a stump speech, she'd talk about how many African-American predators, and you used Hillary's terminology from back when, African-American predators, how many she bragged about locking up. She never had a rehabilitative or a reform program she offered for them. So I'm just resentful of this kind of thing where people come in and they don't have to put up with any of the onus because they can say, oh, no, I am a Hindu. I am not black. And they get treated with deference. Or when it's to an advantage, I'm black so I can get all the goodies that I know how to claim and then back off. And she's got a white husband. Now, I'm not getting on somebody because they got a little swing white, but bottom line is her heart ain't black. Her genes aren't black. And as a matter of fact, considering what her father published in a Jamaican newspaper, she's got less black in her than your typical white man in America's got in him. Now, I know there's that thing that the historical fact in America was one drop made you black. And in fact, when I first started practicing law, the Tennessee statute read, that was in effect, said, for purposes of this statute, any person with any known colored ancestry will be considered colored for purposes of this statute. Now, there's a movie out that's based on reality. And in fact, I know 3 descendants of the protagonist. In 1947, there was it's called the Free State of Jones. Now, 1947, there was a big stink about a white man being convicted of a felony and sentenced to 10 years in a Mississippi penitentiary because he married a white woman. But it turned out they found that his grandfather had his relative by a former slave who was only part black, and he left the record of it in his diary. They used that to prosecute him and send him to the penitentiary. But the Mississippi Supreme Court set it aside because the U.S. Department of Justice under Harry Truman got sicked on them, and they did not want the U.S. Supreme Court coming in and meddling with Mississippi jurisprudence. So they set the conviction aside on a technicality. But that whole movie is based on that proposition. But that man now, some of his descendants, in a follow-up story, have been tested, and they have less black in them DNA-wise than your typical white person in America. So you've got to understand there's a cultural and a reality aspect to it. And then the thing of it is that her black didn't come to her through American situation. They came to her because somebody that was a Jamaican planter and another somebody that was a Jamaican planter back when had not a mistress in one case, but a wife, and a mistress in another who had a small smidgen of black in them. And then you see Jamaica. I've been to Jamaica a lot. Guest of the government, guest of the prime minister, guest of the governor general. Toured the island government courtesy, or toured the island as a tourist, or just gone and hang out for several weeks at a time. I've been doing that for 40 years. And there are Hindu, there are whites, and there are a lot of Asians in Jamaica. And somebody saying I'm a Jamaican does not mean he mind what's going on, man. He mind everything gonna be all right. And then they have this place called St. Elizabeth Parish, where everybody looks as pale as I do. See, and everybody gets joked, man. Hey, man, you Jamaican, George. You look like you come from St. Elizabeth Parish, buddy. No, man. But, see, you get the wrong idea, and we get too much foolishness based on false information. But then I'd like to switch up a little bit. Let's talk about Cory Booker. What in the world is he up to? And then hooking himself up along with Kamala Harris with this Susie, what's his name, out of Chicago. They got jacked up and they busted 2 Nigerians. They had to let go. He described his assailants as white, talking about niggas.
Smollett.
Yeah, him. I'm a judge, and I'm not. When I was on the bench, and I still had an active license instead of one that's in medical disability status, I wouldn't comment on stuff. But I'm just a private citizen right now, and I'll be damned if that doesn't stink like a rat trail. Especially in light of what I warned you guys about 2 months ago, H.R. 2282, which is likely to open the door for legalizing pedophilia. They all